Welcome to the After the Breach podcast. We're your hosts, Jeff Friedman and Sara Shimazu from San Juan Island, Washington, and we're working as professional guides and captains with Maya's Legacy Whale Watching. And we had a pretty cool encounter at the end of last month that we wanted to share with you as soon as we got off the boat. Of course, it's our busy season, so it's taken us some time to get that out to you. But luckily for us, Monika, who's been a guest on the podcast, was also out on her own research vessel with Orca Behavior Institute and witnessed it as well. So she's joining us this evening. And Monika, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, always happy to be here.
And before we kind of get into it, we wanted to discuss some recent sightings that have been happening in the area. Jeff, you've been out on the water a lot. I think we all have kind of, and on shore as well in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I was just looking at some of our numbers from our tours, and we are right around 90% of our tours so far in 2023 have seen whales.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's really high. And we've had lots of bigs around lately, and the humpbacks seem to be really coming back, including Big Mama is back. I think we were kind of wondering
where she was.
Yeah, but she made an appearance.
Yeah, I think right after we published our last episode, she showed up and was around for a week and a half, and now has kind of moved into her other feeding grounds, I think probably further north.
Yeah, and we have our first mom-calf pair, but I don't think anybody has been out to get IDs on those two, but they were seen from shore from a distance.
Yeah, I think I saw that on the whale sightings page.
Yeah, Olympus
was
the female. Yeah,
I didn't know we had an ID. Very cool.
Yeah, I don't think there was a confirmed calf, but hopefully, but at least one of them was Olympus, and she is a female, so could be.
Awesome. And Monika, Orca Behavior Institute posted their May 2023 killer whale sightings just today, I saw.
Yeah, third year in a row, there's been bigs confirmed in the Salish Sea every single day in the month of May. That seems to be the new normal, especially in these spring months. Over 100 different individual members of the Bigg's killer whale population were here, or at least paid a visit. Some of them spending pretty much the entire month here. So there's been a lot of action out there.
Yeah, here's looking at you, T124Ds and 71Bs. What was it, like 7 weeks?
Yeah, it was like 7 weeks down in Puget Sound. So for those of you who aren't familiar with exactly where the boundaries of the Salish Sea goes all the way down into Puget Sound and then all the way up north to Campbell River, BC. And
then out west to the entrance of the Strait of Fuca. Well, speaking of whales we see here in the Salish Sea and how far they roam, just the last couple of days, T65Bs, who we talked about in our Meet the Matriline section on our last episode, have been seen in Monterey Bay the last couple of days.
It's so incredible because we always talk about this with our guests before the tour of how the bigs travel in these small groups from Southeast Alaska and then down through the Salish Sea, and they can go as far south as Northern California. And it's always awesome when we get an example of this. I think the last one that we knew of were the 37As. And now we have the 65Bs. And it was fast, too, that they were seen here. And then they've been seen the last couple of days in Monterey Bay.
Yeah, May 23rd is the last day we had confirmation of them in the central Salish Sea here in the southern Gulf Islands. So that's just under 2 weeks, I think, and something like 1,100 or 1,200 miles with a new little calf.
Yeah, with a new calf. Right. Amazing.
Yeah, slipstreams, right? Like it's got to be pulling you along to California.
Yeah, it's amazing. And as far as I know, I've never heard of any of the 65As or Bs or T65 or 63 being seen down that far.
Yeah, to my knowledge, I haven't heard of that either.
And it sounded like they were maybe associating with some of the CA or California bigs down there. So there's really more blurred boundaries between the different Bigg's killer whale populations, which is something we don't see with the different resident killer whale populations. So I suspect they may intermingle even more than we know.
I think so too. And I may not be 100% correct in remembering this, but I believe that I was having a conversation at one point with Jared Towers, and he said that once you get out to the outer coast, that they are kind of mixing together out there. So I definitely think that there are very blurry lines between the California bigs and the Pacific Northwest.
There's some big
bigs.
parties going on out there. That
And,
were
and Alaska as well. I think it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, before we get into this, but with the boys that have spent, most of their life up in Alaska, but I digress. We'll get to that in a minute. But we still had some other cool sightings recently. T123s kind of made their, not return because they'd been here earlier, but they'd been gone for a while and then showed back up. And
they're always fun to see because everybody loves Stanley.
Mm-hmm. And then the T124As have been around a lot, which I'm loving.
Yeah. They're a fun young family to see with the two terrible twos.
Almost, yep. Yeah, they're there.
Two 2-year-old girls. One is the aunt of the other. And they're fun to watch. It's a young, dynamic family. And they've been around a lot.
Really cool to see T124A1 back with her matriline as well. She roams quite a bit from a pretty young age, and we've seen her periodically back with them, but I don't recall her spending this much time with them in quite a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. I think at least a few years since I've seen her back with a family for, such an extended period of time, I guess.
And the T65As came back this week after a long absence, and came back in and went straight down to Puget Sound like they've been doing the last few years.
Well, of course, the 71Bs and 124Ds finally vacated the area. So,
I think that's funny, and I think I've noticed that in the last couple of years. It's like they don't want to be down in Puget Sound when there are other families down there. It's like they like to have it to themselves.
The 65As specifically?
Yeah. It's like they're going to wait till everybody else leaves, and then they're going to go down there and camp out for a few weeks.
And they made their trip into Hood Canal today. So
I did see that. They do love Hood Canal.
They do love Hood Canal.
And we'll hopefully post the graph, Monika, if that's okay, of the sightings for May 2023. But in that map, we'll have, Hood Canal. We'll try to point out where these places are for those of you that aren't familiar with the area. And last but certainly not least, J-Pod made a return back. So was it April 30th they left last?
Yeah, they were out in the Strait of Juan de Fuca on April 30th, kind of making what has been their spring exit in the month of April. And for an entire month, the only word we had of them was sighting off Tofino, which seems to be their, where they've been popping up at least once or twice in the month of May. And then we were wondering if they were going to put up another 0 for the month of May. 4 out of the last 6 years, we've had no southern residents at all in the month of May, which still just blows my mind.
Didn't it used to be like 28 days on average in May?
It was high. I mean, it was just J-Pod. We didn't see a lot of Ks and Ls, but they used to be doing their regular circuit here all throughout May, and that is no longer the case. But the night of May 30th after dark, they were heard on the Limekiln hydrophone, and then they hung out for about 6 days, kind of doing their circuit up to the mouth of the Fraser River, doing a couple days of the West Side Shuffle on the west side of San Juan Island, and happy to report we did see all 25 members of J-Pod. So after an absence, I always like to take an extra close look, and everybody was here.
Yeah, for sure. And Jeff, you got out to the west side. I finally got out to the west side coincided with one of my days off.
It's been, I think, 4 years since I've been able to get out to the west side to see J-Pod. So that was pretty cool. It was a really nice experience. And now they've gone back out and they've made an exit. Any predictions on when they're coming back? Because June the last few years has been pretty light with them as well.
It has, but last year they were in and out a bit in June. So I'm hopeful Jays will be back here in the next week or two, if it's anything like last year. And then if recent patterns also hold, we might see K-Pod in early July.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see when Ks and Ls come in. I mean, I can't remember the last time I personally saw Ks and Ls. I mean, it's been. I think I saw one matriline from L-Pod last year. And I don't believe I saw Ks.
I think it was probably 2020 when we were really like in September and October of 2020 when we were really seeing them last for,
Yeah, we have had a lot of people asking about Ks and Ls, and it's not unusual for them to not be here this time of year. That's always been the case. They just usually, would come back in June or July and then spend most of the summer here. And now they're only making brief visits throughout the summer. But it's not concerning, that we haven't seen them here since January. There was that report of them down in Monterey. But we really don't get to do a full survey of the southern resident population, all 3 pods, until they've all returned to the Salish Sea, which has been later in the summer, and Center for Whale Research gets to get out and do their census. So we've had lots of people asking about Ks and Ls, and we don't have an update yet, but that's not concerning. That's not unusual for this time of year.
And for me, I think it's actually encouraging that all 3 pods are changing their historical patterns, because we get this question so much on the boats is why don't they adapt? And to me, they are adapting. They are changing their older patterns to newer patterns, and that is probably benefiting them to finding new places or going to places where they will have more food.
Yeah, it's a positive sign for sure that they're, I think asking them to switch to eating marine mammals is too big of an ask.
In one generation.
Yeah, but the fact that they're shifting habitat usage in response to prey availability is a good thing, as long as there are areas for them to go where there are more fish. But we've had actually, at or above historic numbers of days of them in Puget Sound in the fall, and that reflects those strong chum salmon runs that are returning to Puget Sound. So they are coming in more at a different time of year than they used to be here historically. But we've actually got a 5-year summary sightings paper coming out here in the next couple weeks, and it really highlights that we now have the southern residents here more from October to March than we do from April to at least August. September's still been pretty high, but it's kind of flipped from what it was 20 years ago.
Sure. Well, congratulations on that paper being accepted, by the way.
Thanks.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing that. And that's the other part of this that I find fascinating is there's still so much information out there that says, the best time to see southern residents around the San Juan Islands is May through September. And it's completely changed for seeing the southern residents in the inland waters. It is fall and winter.
It is kind of mind-blowing how hard it is to get that information out there. I mean, that type of documentation and data is one of our original motivations to start Orca Behavior Institute, was track these things, get these numbers out there. But a lot of the seasonal management protections are still summer-based, and that's not when they're here anymore. So we need to find a way to really, emphasize what's happening now and make sure that any protections we're putting into place are at the right time of year when they're actually using these waters.
Right. And in the right locations where they're using these waters.
That too, not where they used to be. And specifically, where they're foraging is most important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then it's amazing too, with Bigg's killer whales are, like you said, every day in May. And I think where we're trending, because of their food supply in the inland waters in the Salish Sea, and where their population is exploding, I think we're going to get to a place where if there's enough eyes on the water to collect the data, we'll have them, at least one member from the Biggs or one matriline here every day of the year.
Yeah, I don't doubt that they're here every day of the year, but we don't always hear about them, especially when the weather's worse and the daylight hours are shorter in the wintertime. But it's been amazing to document. I mean, we're pretty much maxing out days present from spring, summer, fall with Biggs. That's why we're starting to track things like number of different groups or number of different whales to quantify how they're still increasing, because you can't get any higher than 31 days in May.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And it'll be good to have new tools available for not just seeing, but also hearing, because Obi has a sponsored hydrophone now in San Juan Channel. Yes,
we're very excited to get that up and running. A North San Juan Channel node of an orcasound.net hydrophone. So, just missed, I think, the window for hearing the southern residents in San Juan Channel. That's something they tend to do in kind of October to March. We get jays through there, but hopeful with all these Biggs around that at some point soon we'll get our first whale vocalizations over that new hydrophone.
Yeah, we do tend to get some, at least attempted and probably successful stellar sea lion hunts in that general area too. So hopefully we'll get some cool post-hunt celebration vocalizations.
And who knows, maybe some humpback sounds in the fall.
Absolutely.
And early winter would be really cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, you guys ready to dive into this kind of cool encounter we had on May 20th?
Yeah, let's talk about the Alaska boys.
I mean, they're all Alaskan, right? They
I
all go up to
know,
Alaska.
but there's something about that name, the Alaska brothers.
I know. You like the like Butcher Boys, Alaska Boys. I get it. I do. But I was thinking we could kind of go through with the facts of it first, and then maybe like what I know we all had our little interpretations of what was going on. But
and I think both of you were on the water longer that day than I was.
Yeah, maybe.
I had one trip in the afternoon.
Really.
It was just the afternoon, really, that it happened. I mean,
but tracking what happened that day, I mean, it really shows the collaboration in the community that we have here, because nobody was with them for this entire day.
Right.
Yet the observations that occurred from, half a dozen different people really allowed us to kind of piece the story together, at least as much as we know, which is really cool.
It's a good point. When you put the observations together, I think they were found pretty early, like around 10:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And then observations went all the way to, past 9 o'clock, around last light.
Yeah. Yep. So when Jeff says the Alaska boys, the two whales that he's referring to are T125A and his presumed older brother T128. T125A born in 1998 to T125, and T128, who, though he has a higher number, is actually an older whale, presumed son of T125, born in 1988.
So the Alaska brothers.
So potentially brothers.
All right. So can we backtrack about them? Because they're relatively new to me, because they were not seen here for very often, or there was a long absence. But the last few years, they've come down to the Salish Sea and have spent some quality time down here.
Yeah. So they're a pretty cool family. It's a family of 4 altogether. So T125, the mom, and then her 3 sons, T127, T128, which, just like Chainsaw, T63 with the matriline last episode, those 2 boys were too old to be obviously confirmed absolutely for sure that they're her offspring, but long-term association kind of dictates that they're probably her sons. And then her only confirmed son, T125A. And so they were not here a lot. But on June 2nd, 2015, I got out on the water and in Boundary Pass came upon the T65As in this family. And it was a pretty cool sight because T127, we'll put a photo of him up, has this kind of really mangled dorsal fin.
Hacksaw.
Yeah. And he's not been here that much since then. I think just a couple of sightings, him and mom.
I think I was out there that day because I think I do somewhere have a photo.
Yeah, they were super social, lots and lots of interaction and socializing with the 65As.
So the 4 of them on that 2015 visit were around for a few days at least, but since then they seem to have split into these 2 pairs of mom and the oldest T127 and then the 2 brothers.
Right.
And prior to 2015,
they hadn't been seen here in 22 years.
22 years. That's
amazing.
What
Dave said that day. Still sticks out to me in my mind.
Yeah, that's mind blowing.
That is absolutely mind blowing. So after 22 years, they decide, okay, let's go check back in the Salish Sea.
And the brothers are like, hey, we like this place.
So the 2 brothers have been coming back here.
Yep. I think they've been back almost every year since then.
They have.
Every year. Okay, perfect.
And it feels like and Monika, you have the data on this. I just have the anecdotal, but it does feel like they're spending more time here than each year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if it's steadily been going up, but it's definitely more in recent years than it was early on.
Right. And it's not an ongoing presence. They come in and leave, and then they come back, and they'll be here for a few days at a time. But it does seem like we see them more often now than definitely 8-9 years ago when I first started. It definitely, in my first few years, it definitely seems like we're seeing them more often.
And I feel like they're kind of spring whales. Is that right? Like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they show up in the fall too, but I do feel like they're kind of here like late winter through.
I think that's when they spend most of their
summer.
time here. They've made some visits possibly other times a year, but spring seems to be when they kind of do the whole Salish Sea tour.
I did have them. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but I did have them on one of our all-day tours, and they were killing seals down off of Port Townsend.
Oh, I remember that day.
Like actually south of there, almost. I mean, we got them almost in Hood Canal.
Yeah, that was after. I think you got on scene after I did. I think it was an earlier tour, but yeah, I remember that. So anyway, back to May 20th, since we've kind of introduced the family and their history.
So let's talk about what happened that day.
Yeah, so I was not out in the morning. But Monika, maybe I know you kind of talked with some friends of ours, Amanda from Salish Sea School, and some other folks that were viewing from private boats or from shore. But the two were found, and they were pretty split up, I think, like by a mile.
Yeah. That's what all of the early reports that I saw kept saying, that they were spread really far.
Yeah, so they were down by Smith Island, south of Lopez Island, and started heading north up Rosario Strait between the San Juan Islands and the mainland. And yeah, they stayed 1 to 2 miles apart, which nothing too alarming about just that. Sometimes, they spread out like that. They briefly came together, and it looked like T125A caught a seal and was maybe carrying it for a little while in close proximity to T128, and then they split right after that, and T128 went west through Thatcher Pass, and T125A continued north up Rosario Strait.
So at this point, there's no line of sight or for like vocal communication, or like they have an island in between them.
Right.
And this is something we see with Biggs frequently, right? Where they split, they know it's an island. They somehow agree that we're going to go on each side and meet up on the other side. So,
Only they didn't meet up. So Jeff and actually Monika, you guys got on scene with T128 kind of inner island, like west side of Blakely Island. Is that right?
Yeah. And he was just hanging out, kind of doing long dives, zigzagging, going back and forth. Didn't seem like he had a destination in mind at that point in time.
It was the key to that, I think, the back and forth. I mean, he was going up the island and like right before he would get to Peavine Pass, which would lead him back out to Rosario Strait, or at least in vocal range, he'd turn around and come back down towards Thatcher. And then as soon as he would get to the entrance of Thatcher to get back into Rosario and get into line of sight with his brother, he'd turn around. And it was just back and forth.
Sometimes we see pacing behavior that maybe looks intense or stressed, and this was not that. This was
very
casual. But we noticed that he had some pretty severe new rake marks on his dorsal fin.
Yeah, and I didn't see him, but I saw your photos, and I mean, it was up the almost entire length of his dorsal fin and like deep. It was definitely marks on both sides. Deeper, it kind of wounds, it looked like on the left side of his dorsal fin, but seemed consistent with rake marks from another killer whale.
And rake marks on killer whales isn't uncommon. We see that a lot, but these were pretty pronounced. Yeah, usually they're not fresh. Like this deep.
Yeah, they don't usually break the skin to the point that there's scar tissue emerging. Right. But that was the case here.
And we'll post some of those photos.
And we'll also post like a map on kind of the routes of the two whales. So you guys that are not familiar with the area can kind of see and follow along with what we're talking about. So T128 on the west side of this island. The east side of the island is Rosario Strait, as Jeff mentioned, and that's where T125A was. And he, at this point, the tide was coming in, flooding, and so the water was moving south to north up this strait. And David and I got on scene with T125A. We just, there weren't a lot of boats with him. We figured we'd go and see what was going on with that guy. And he was out kind of north of the Peavine Pass area, so just north of Blakely Island in Rosario Strait. And he had been moving north when we first got on scene. And as we were coming on scene, he was pretty active, like tail throwing, slapping. I think there was even a breach. And
this was at the same time that both Monika and I were with 128 on the other side of the island.
Yeah. So we get on scene, and he turns around pretty quickly, did a very obvious U-turn, and was just like booking it against the flood tide, not going anywhere. Like he was riding the treadmill, as we say, just heading south back towards the way he had come, with a lot of intent. Like he was moving. He was trying to get somewhere, and just like the flood tide was coming in, and he wasn't making any progress. But the one thing that was interesting is every time he'd surface, and we've seen it, like some whales will come up and they're kind of cryptic and they're low key and they're not like displacing a lot of water. He was the opposite of that. He wasn't porpoising, but he was coming up and just displacing a lot of water. Sometimes he would roll and like slap his dorsal fin on the surface of the water as he went down. He was just kind of, it was almost like he was trying to make a lot of noise, which is something I, don't normally say about these whales. They're not like overly.
Yeah, it's one of our theories as to what role those, we call them percussive behaviors, right? Tail slaps, dorsal fin slaps, pec fin slaps, and they make a noise on the water. And one possible role of those behaviors is communication.
Right. And so we were with him for probably 30 minutes while he's just doing this very consistent, like south facing, not going anywhere. And the other boats had left. So it was just our boat and him. And he was probably, close to a half a mile off at this point, and went on a long dive, and then came up facing north again, but came over towards us, and we could hear his vocalizations through the hull of the boat. We didn't even have a hydrophone in, but we could hear him through the aluminum hull of the boat. And he circled around us, and for probably 5 minutes, we could hear him vocalizing. We dropped a hydrophone, and it was just like a blasting sound. As much as he could be calling, it was just kind of an interesting and intense vocalization.
So Biggs, even when they are vocal, a lot of times they're fairly quiet, right? Like if you drop the hydrophone and they're vocalizing, you can hear them, but they're often not the same sort of amplitude that we hear from the southern residents. But it sounds like that was not the case here, that he was loud.
Yeah, definitely not the case. And we'll try to get some of that vocal. I took a video. The audio is not the best, but we'll try to share some of that. Those vocalizations. And Monika, I sent the video to you, and you had some interesting observations about those vocalizations.
Yeah, they were clearly coming from him. They were Bigg's killer whale calls, but they were not calls that I could immediately recognize or match to one of their known discrete call types. So I actually sent your short clip to John Ford, who's acoustics expert on killer whales in this region, and he recognized the calls immediately as part of what he called kind of a variable family of discrete calls, meaning that there's a lot of different forms, and he and his colleagues have not fully deciphered, what the different call types or subtypes are. So kind of an interesting family of calls that maybe is not super well known or well studied yet.
So that's happening. He eventually continues south again. And Jeff, you're with T128 still, and he did something interesting.
Yeah. So he came out into Thatcher Pass.
Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden he transitioned from this lazy back and forth to he just took off.
Yeah. He was going fast and came out into Thatcher Pass, right around this same time that this was going on. So very likely, of course, we can't tell for sure, but very likely heard these vocals.
Wasn't that far away.
Based on where he was in the strait, he should have been within acoustic range of his brother.
Right. He was definitely had line of sight, so should have been receiving the sound from him.
But a few miles away, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And did a complete about face and came charging back into the inner island waters, into Lopez Sound.
Yeah. And you came out then at that point.
Yeah, we decided to leave him. There was another boat or two with him, and then we came out to you guys.
And we handed off. But I mean, we were leaving at that point, so Jeff kind of took over.
And we got the first visual for me to identify where he was, I think, was he had a pretty sizable tail slap.
Yeah. And did you leave him going south?
He was going south. He was making some headway, and he was actually he didn't make it all the way to Thatcher Pass, but he made it to like the Peavine and Obstruction Pass. So he should have had at least some line of sight there into part of the area where his brother was.
Maybe, yeah. That's kind of
Tricky.
bendy there.
It is bendy, but
I would believe they were still not in acoustic range of one another then.
But at this same time, his brother was no longer going back and forth on the island. The boats that were there were leaving him, and at this point, he was going westbound towards the Lopez ferry landing, and it was getting pretty late.
Right.
Like we left shortly after that, and 125A was still just plowing down Rosario, and 128 was going west towards the Lopez. Like they were basically going not in opposite directions, but definitely not towards each other.
So one could venture to guess that T128 knew where his brother was and T125A probably didn't.
That's,
Maybe.
This is where the factual account ends, right?
Yeah.
And we enter into speculation, but we all encountered those whales at different times, but left with the same impression of the overall incident that T128 was not really concerned about the situation, but based on the behavior, the vocalizing, the surface percussion, T125A seemed to be looking for his brother, presumably.
Yeah.
And just to backtrack a little bit, not about this encounter, but in general, and Monika, you alluded to this earlier, like seeing them spread out by a mile or on different sides of an island, or even spread out by 5 miles. Like this is something that we see fairly often enough that, they come back together and it's really just no big deal. I think our relationship with space and separation is very different from theirs, but this felt very, very different from what we normally would see when whales spread apart.
Yeah, I think nothing about this was really unusual, even when they went on either side of Blakely Island, until they didn't meet up again on the north side of Blakely. Right? That we had one whale stall out casually and one whale stall out
Not casually.
with intensity.
Yeah.
Well, and obviously, like you said, the factual part of the encounter is over, and now we're speculating. But it definitely felt like 128 was like very casual in this avoidance behavior.
Well, and to me, like the clincher was his poking out into Rosario Strait when T125A was being loud.
Yeah.
And then immediately like rushing back out of acoustic range. Like he was checking on the status of what was going on, right? And then saying, okay, I'm going back over here where I can't hear you and you can't hear me.
Yeah, I think we all kind of were wondering if those rake marks were caused by 125A and 128 was holding a little bit of a grudge. I mean, fair enough. I would too.
Yeah, I mean, that looked painful. I mean, it looks like something that he will fully recover from, right? But if those were caused by 125A, it was either some type of aggressive interaction between the two, or we know that killer whales roughhouse with one another all the time, and that includes raking. But because of the the depth of these rake marks, that maybe he went a little too far and
crossed the line.
Ow! Yeah.
And now he's going back up north to tell mom.
I know, that's the cliffhanger, right?
Yeah.
They were heading apart that evening at sunset, and we don't know what happened.
We have not seen them since,
or had any reports of them.
Right, and that was we were all like, man, I hope they're seen tomorrow, and because typically that was their first day that they were back recently, and because they had we had seen them this year, but we hadn't seen them in a little while. And so my thinking was, well, yeah, we're going to definitely see them tomorrow because they just got back here. Like they'll be around for at least a few days, at worst case, a few days. And nobody's seen them since.
I'm going to really laugh if T128 shows up with mom and older brother and T125A is still on his own.
Well, it's funny because the story that I have told myself in my head of how this resolved was that the weather, like south of the San Juan Islands, that next day was rough. Like nobody was going out that south. Everybody was going north. And so what I like to tell myself in my head is that 128 went past the Lopez Ferry landing and went down Upright Channel and down San Juan Channel into the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and 125A kept going down Rosario Strait into the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And they met sometime during the night down south and
reconciled
and said, "Hey bro, let's go back. We're all good. Let's go back. Let's go back to mom."
And obviously we're just like interpreting their behavior. This is in no way factual.
But at the same time, you know, killer whales are intelligent. We know they're wired for complex emotions, and they have these lifelong social bonds. And if you're hanging out with another individual all day, every day, you know, it's not a stretch to say there are going to be conflicts. They're not always going to get along.
Right.
And we have to speculate about the details of that, but it's certainly within the realm of, I think, what we would expect to happen is, you know, two brothers getting into a fight is a completely reasonable explanation for that behavior.
I think Jeff can probably concur that that's true.
I've never had a fight with my brother. No, but I mean, you're right. It's to not speculate that there was something unusual going on, like what you're saying, makes no sense when, you know, for not just the three of us in this room, but all of the people that contributed to the observations that day, who spent thousands or tens of thousands of hours around killer whales, and take this one encounter and are all kind of leaning in that same direction of, this felt like it wasn't a typical.
Something different's going on here.
Right. There is something going on very intentionally with their split.
And as you both have said, none of their behaviors were odd for Bigg's killer whales, but in the context of knowing these two brothers and having observed them many, many times over the years, this was odd.
Yes, definitely. Like there was definitely something going on. And then we have the clue of these deep rake marks.
Yeah, right. And they were, I mean, we're not experts in this regard, but it seemed like they were not completely fresh, like they hadn't just happened, but maybe within the last couple of days.
Right. Yeah, that's what it looked like to me. And again, not an expert, but
right. And of course it's possible that, you know, if they listen to this podcast, that they'd be like, "Oh my God, you guys are such idiots. One has nothing to do with the other. Like he just insulted me, but the rake marks weren't his." I mean, yeah.
Well, if you're listening, please call in and explain, because there are many people that would love to know.
You can just text us. We don't even have to call.
But there were people that were also expressing concern that if they got permanently split up. And I just want to clarify too, that we see adult male killer whales on their own regularly as well. And they're completely self-sufficient. So even if they remain separated or there is some long-term damage to their relationship, they're both going to be fine. You know, the injury wasn't anything severe enough that we would expect any long-term health impacts to T128. And I'm certain they're both capable of, you know, foraging on their own without the help of their brother. So in terms of their individual well-being, I don't think there's anything concerning about this going forward.
Yeah,
we see lots of independent males. And they bounce around with other groups. And so do the two Alaska brothers. We see them not just together by themselves. We see them with other families as well.
Yeah. And it's just, the more time that passes, the less we will even know about the next piece of this story, right? But I think we're all waiting with bated breath for, when are they next seen, and are they together or are they not together is really the big question.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's funny. Every time I get a report
of two whales,
I'm like, oh, is it them? Is it them?
And
So Jeff, you think they reconciled? I think they reconciled. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I think they probably did. I'm kind of leaning towards the fact that maybe not that night, but yeah, I think they'll show up the next time together.
I think so too. It'll be really interesting if
they don't.
If they don't, yeah.
Yeah.
What if they totally mix it up and it's like T128 with T125 and T127 with T125A?
Oh, mom has to intervene and separate them.
That's possible too.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Hopefully not another 22 years.
Oh no, no.
Oh, that would be awful. So what, as far as their distribution, I mean, so where in the distribution maps for them, where have they been documented up in Alaska? How far?
I think they've been a lot off like Haida Gwaii and central BC as well, right?
Yeah, Haida Gwaii, like North Island. There's really not a whole lot of like in the sighting map that Jared and everyone he collaborated with to put together the ID guide in 2019. There was one sighting up near Juneau. But really mainly Haida Gwaii. And there's kind of like a cluster of sightings like right off the north tip of Haida Gwaii and then a couple on the southeast side. Right.
I mean, this is all with the caveat that the further north you get, basically like you're not going to have as many documented sightings.
Right.
Of any matriline.
Yeah, it's a lot of wilderness out there and rough seas.
So we'll definitely keep everybody posted as and we'll talk about the Alaska Boys when we
tune in 22 years from now with the update.
Right. I don't know that we're going to be podcasting quite that long, but you never know.
We'll see. Maybe we'll have to do a special episode in 22 years.
I hadn't even considered that possibility. Now I'm just like, I can't wait that long.
Hopefully we don't have to. Maybe tomorrow they'll show up.
Oh, that would be great. There is something about
the mystery.
Well, there's something uncanny about killer whales that when they very well may show up tomorrow, and we'll have to reconvene because I won't be putting this out tomorrow. We'll have to reconvene.
So if there's a postscript added.
Right, exactly.
And we're back.
Yeah, I mean, it is uncanny how they kind of like, who was it? We were just talking about a family or maybe it was a humpback. It was a humpback that we were talking about that we hadn't seen yet that showed up the next day.
Oh, Big Mama.
No, it wasn't Big Mama. It was Valiant.
Oh, but Big Mama did that too. We were talking about her and then she showed up the next day. But yeah, Valiant as well.
Yeah. So whales have a weird sense of timing with this. So I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure we're going to see these two tomorrow. Or at least one of the two.
Yeah.
No, both of them. Both of them.
So we will keep everybody updated. We do have a photo workshop coming up.
We do in September.
So we'd love for you to join us on that. If you're interested, you can email us.
And it's also on our website now.
It is on our website, afterthebreachpodcast.com.
But it's September 23rd and 24th, 2 days, full days on the water. And you don't have to sign up for both days. You can sign up for one day. We're going to go out and just see what we can find. Monica's been out with us on our all-day trips in the fall, and hopefully she can say that they're amazing.
They are amazing, and September is my favorite month on the water here.
My favorite month, too.
It's just beautiful.
We get typically great weather, and there's just something about September whales. We definitely get a lot of groups of bigs, and hopefully on the days that we're out with this photo workshop, we get quite a few days of these very, very big aggregations of actively feeding humpbacks.
And just throwing it out there, we also get puffins too.
We do get puffins.
Which, I know, side note, this is a whale podcast, but did you guys see that the horned puffin showed back up at Smith Island?
Yeah, I did see that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I didn't see it last year, but hopefully this year.
And if you come out for the photo workshop, September is the month that we still have southern residents around to the degree that we kind of used to historically. So spend a couple extra days on San Juan Island, hang out on the west side, and that's when people ask about seeing them from shore here, I told them a few days on the west side in September is your best bet.
Yeah, and it's magic.
It is. It's such a great time to be here, and the weather's still nice. It's sunny. It's probably our least windy month. Mm-hmm. So like glassy seas.
Yeah.
Oh, now you've jinxed it.
Yeah.
No.
Thanks,
no,
Jeff.
No. That's, you always say that, but I'm saying I'm not jinx. I don't jinx the weather.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Monika, thanks so much for coming on and recapping this kind of interesting encounter with us.
Of course. Happy to be here as always.
And yeah, if you guys have any questions or suggestions on topics you'd like to hear, feel free to drop us a message on our Instagram account or on our Facebook page, or send us an email at afterthebreachpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll look for you next time.
All right, Sarah.
Stay safe out there.